The world is opening up. India too is unlocking. But are we forgetting the scars of COVID second wave and throwing caution to wind? Are we even unlocking right? Look at these pictures. A vegetable market where COVIDians have thrown caution to wind. A mall that saw a footfall of 19,000 people in Delhi. Well, parks are shut, but restaurants are open. Up ahead on the show, we talk about the world unlocking and why right now we have to simply unlock in a scientific way. How do we go about doing that? I'm Sneha Mordani. This is COVID 360. First up, this report from the national capital. The High Court warning of a third wave as protocols are violated in Delhi. The Delhi High Court has issued notices to the centre and to the Delhi government saying that we are inviting trouble. Here's more.
A city devastated by the second COVID wave. And this is what it looks like now. Crowded markets and malls, zero distance and mask protocol. Memories of the horrors have all evaporated. And the COVIDiots of the capital appear to be issuing an open invitation to that dreaded third wave. As we have seen so often recently, the courts have had to step in. The Delhi High Court on Friday took unilateral cognizance of these disturbing images and has issued notices to the centre and Delhi governments asking them to explain why this is being allowed.
In a lot of places, people are forgetting the COVID protocols, because of which Delhi High Court judges have come down heavily and they have said measures need to be put in place which need to be followed. Otherwise, we could see a definite third wave.
The High Court asked the centre and Delhi government to take strict measures, sensitize shopkeepers and hold meetings with markets and vendors associations in this regard. Television screens and social media have been flooded in the recent weeks with images of rampant crowding in markets across the national capital. From Delhi's Sadar Bazaar to Sarojini Nagar market to the upscale Khan market. Delhi citizens have exploded out onto the streets. While crowds surge, shopkeepers say they are following all protocols.
Moreover, the people who come here, they are more educated, I would say, and more cautious about, COVID-appropriate behavior. So in Khan market, such problem is not being seen.
In first wave, I used to avoid sometimes. Sometimes I pull it down and all. But I think so now it's got a habit now. If I don't wear the mask, I feel something is missing in me. But this becomes now a part and parcel of a lifestyle only.
The irony of these images is that Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal said as many as 5,000 youth are being trained to work as assistants to doctors and nurses to mitigate possible shortages of medical staff during the third COVID-19 wave.
सरकार ने एक बहुत बड़ा एम्बिशियस प्लान बनाया है। 5,000 हेल्थ असिस्टेंट्स तैयार करने का। इनको टेक्निकल भाषा में कम्युनिटी नर्सिंग असिस्टेंट्स कहते हैं।
The decision comes after the Delhi government has already set up 2 committees to manage the third wave and mitigate its impact. But the unstoppable crowds in the capital won't stop tempting fate. Forgetting protocols is bad enough, but how could they forget the misery, the agony, the suffering that ravaged Delhi just weeks ago? With Aishwarya Paliwal in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Hundreds of tourists throng Himachal Pradesh after the government relaxed norms. Delhiites want to get away, but why are we throwing caution to wind? Take a look.
Delhiites are breaking free. And it's the highway to Himachal Pradesh they're taking after weeks of being cooped up in their homes because of the lockdown. Himachal Pradesh is welcoming them. Starved of tourist revenue in summer, Himachal is allowing tourists in without an RT-PCR test certificate. All that tourists have to do is register themselves on the state's COVID portal and get a COVID e-pass. Shimla and Manali are the favorite destinations. More than 3,000 tourists arrived in Manali last week. 5,000 checked into Shimla.
बाहर निकलने का काफ़ी मन हो रहा था, तो इसीलिए जैसे ही लॉकडाउन खुला तो बाहर आ गए घूमने के लिए। घर पे बोर फील कर रहे थे और सारा जो था हमारा जो दिनचर्या वो एकदम से रुक सी गई थी।
लोग पूरा सर कहीं भी निकल रहे हैं, मास्क पहन के निकल रहे हैं। सबकी जेब में आपको इंडिविजुअल सैनिटाइजर मिलेगा। जहाँ जहाँ हमारे को मौका मिल रहा है वहाँ हम लोग हैंड वॉश भी कर रहे हैं।
हमने पहले प्लानिंग तो कर रखी थी, लेकिन यहाँ पे ई पास और कोविड RT-PCR कोरोना बहुत ज़्यादा था, तो सोच रहे थे कि बाहर आएंगे, क्या पता कोरोना हो जाए, कुछ हो जाए। फिर एकदम से मन हुआ, जैसे हिमाचल खुला तो हम सीधा मनाली आ गए।
But it's still not like any other summer in normal times in Himachal. The occupancy in hotels is around 30 to 40%. Hotel owners feel the COVID e-pass requirement could be the reason for a lower footfall.
ई-पास बनाने में और ऑनलाइन जाने में काफ़ी दिक्कत हो रही है गेस्टों को। वो होटल वालों को रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं। होटल वाले जब एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के पास करते हैं तो उनके पास काफ़ी लाइन लगी रहती है। गेस्ट काफ़ी हरास हो जाते हैं इसमें। तो इसमें अगर थोड़ा सा इजी वे कर दें इसको तो काफ़ी फ़र्क पड़ेगा आने वाले टाइम पे।
Nearly 10,000 people had applied for COVID passes to enter Himachal, but only 3,000 were issued.
जो इंटरस्टेट मूवमेंट के लिए कुछ जो रिस्ट्रिक्शन लगी थी उसमें रिलैक्सेशंस दी हैं। रजिस्ट्रेशन का प्रोसेस अभी भी कायम है, लेकिन जो RT-PCR टेस्ट जो है वही उसको ही हमने रिलैक्स किया है।
Although it has eased norms, the Himachal government is not lifting its guard entirely, particularly with the third wave lurking in the near future. It's quite obvious that the tourism industry, which contributes to over 7% of the state's GDP and employs thousands, will have to wait before full normalcy returns. Bureau Report, India Today.
I spoke earlier to public health experts to gauge what are we doing wrong. Here are excerpts from that conversation. Professor Srinath Reddy, President of the Public Health Foundation of India, and Professor Gautam Menon, the Professor of Physics and Biology, Ashoka University, are both now joining us. Thank you both for your time. I want to begin by asking you that everybody is looking for unlocking, looking forward to unlocking. Professor Menon, your thoughts on the manner in which India has started to unlock, especially the worst hit metropolitan cities. Professor Menon.
I think the basic ideas around the unlock have been good. There's been a graded unlocking in most areas. I'm a bit surprised that open spaces, parks, etc. have not been unlocked, at least according to the first round of the Delhi government. It makes sense to open up open areas that are well ventilated, that are outside rather than inside. I would rather have seen a little more caution around opening up interior locations that are not so well ventilated, theaters, malls, etc. But we'll have to see what happens. We have to be very, very careful about surveillance in the days to come to ensure that we're not seeing an uptick in cases that is significant.
Professor Reddy, do you feel that the way we are opening up is not very scientific? Like Professor Menon pointed out, the idea is to get people to, in fact, not be in an indoor setting. We are in a situation where restaurants have opened up and parks are closed in Delhi, for example.
I entirely agree with Professor Menon that this is a rather surprising and possibly counterproductive approach.
We now recognize much more clearly than we probably were ready to accept last year that aerosol spread is a very common mode, and it's very likely that in closed environments we are likely to see more people get infected than in an open area. In fact, Britain recognized it to its great surprise as well as considerable degree of discomfort that when they started opening up indoor restaurants and in fact even offered discounts so that they could protect the business, that the cases zoomed up and then again they had to go into a lockdown. And we are now allowing indoor restaurants to open. We are allowing malls to be operating, whereas we are closing the parks. And that is indeed a surprise. We ought to do it in a graduated manner. Open up certainly, but in a sensible, graduated manner.
Also, Professor Menon, many experts have voiced concerns that we're not vaccinating well enough. We need to vaccinate more, then open up even further. Would you agree?
Agree completely. All our modeling work suggests that we should be vaccinating at least twice the number that we are vaccinating now. We're currently somewhere between 2.5 to 3 million per day. We should try to push that up to 7 million to 10 million per day if that's all possible. This is the only thing that will really sustain a long-term response to COVID-19 that will enable us to deal with, in future, new variants, because the body will already have some sort of immunological memory to a COVID-19 infection.
Professor Menon, three things that you think the government should be doing as far as unlocking is concerned, and how can they unlock scientifically? What are those top three things that's on your mind right now?
First, do it in a graded manner. Allow people to be outside. People do need a break, but allow people to be outside in open air, well ventilated, outdoors, with some level of distancing. Open up closed venues later, much later. Pay special attention to ventilation in all of these venues. So go and ask people who have sort of small closed shops, theaters, etc., to see what changes they can make to ventilation to ensure that these areas are as well ventilated as possible. Pay great attention to surveillance at this point. Look out very carefully across the city, across India, across the country, for changes in the distribution of cases, increases in test positivity. This is the only thing, good surveillance is the only thing that will provide us some warning system of what might happen in the future if we are not careful.
Professor Reddy, last question to you. Any country that India can really learn from, the way they have opened up, any role model, so to speak?
Well, I think different countries have had different experiences, and we cannot always extrapolate one country's circumstance to ours. But look at the way Vietnam has handled. It has had very few deaths and kept the cases also under control, because they actually ensured that their opening up was also accompanied by a very strict surveillance system. And the moment they saw any outbreaks, they again tightened up some of the movement. There are other countries, particularly in Southeast Asia, which have generally done well, though right now there are a few problems. But even Britain, after having learned from its experience, having opened up too fast, and the next time around, they actually opened up much more slowly, and even now, they're not fully opened up. Despite high levels of vaccination, they're still being extremely cautious. And that's the way we need to be as well.
All right, Professor Menon, Professor Reddy, thank you so much for joining in with your perspective on that very important story, how to unlock right, how to unlock scientifically. Your word of advice is extremely important for the government as it is for all of us here. Thank you. Well, as countries are rushing to unlock their economies, the fear of another wave remains a threat. While many are moving to ease out restrictions, let's take a look at the best and worst practices most countries are following in this report filed by Milind Sharma.
India is now unlocking in phases as COVID cases are showing a downward trend. But what about other nations? Most countries around the world have also eased curbs and slowly are trying to ensure normalcy. With vaccine rates at 70%, cheers and chants of New York City is back. The skyline in New York lit up with fireworks as almost all COVID-19 related restrictions on businesses, gatherings and masks have been lifted as NYC opens up again. England delayed their 21st June unlock plans by 4 weeks after health experts warned of more hospital admissions due to a rise in COVID cases again. Health experts say the decision would provide more time to vaccinate the remaining population.
डेल्टा वेरिएंट है वो अभी भी फैल रहा है और वो अनवैक्सीनेटेड ग्रुप्स में काफ़ी ज़्यादा फैल रहा है और उनकी हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन हो रही हैं। अच्छा स्टेप रहेगा कि अभी हम थोड़ा और स्लो हो जाएं ताकि इसका जो फैलाव है वो उस पर हम लिमिट कर सकें और वो टाइम देगा वैक्सीनेशंस को और ज़्यादा करने के लिए और स्पीड अप करने के लिए। जिनको सिंगल डोज मिली है उनको डबल डोज मिल सकती है और वैक्सीनेशन और स्प्रेड आउट हो जाएगी। With the Tokyo Olympics next month, Japan will ease its emergency curbs.
With limiting spectators to half the capacity, foreign spectators have been barred and fears that the Olympics could trigger another surge in infections. From June 14th, Singapore authorities will allow up to 5 people to gather from the current restriction of just 2. Restaurants will be allowed to open for dine-in from June 21st if the virus remains under control. France is going to end the national curfew 10 days in advance and reopen discos over the summer. Gyms have reopened, indoor dining at restaurants is allowed again. The country has begun to issue a health e-pass to those above 11 years of age and fully vaccinated, those that have developed antibodies for COVID-19 or those who recently tested negative. Hong Kong has decided to ease its border policy by reducing hotel quarantine for many travelers. Authorities are now using finger prick antibody tests to screen vaccinated people. Austria will end a daily curfew from July. Sport and cultural events will be allowed at full capacity. The requirement to wear more protective FFP2 masks in public places has also been removed. Thailand plans to fully reopen to foreign visitors in 120 days and give at least 1 vaccine dose to the majority of residents by early October. Phuket is set to reopen on July 1st. With Milan Sharma, Bureau Report, India Today.
Ignoring warnings will lead to mayhem. Unlocking wrong will lead to havoc. But have we really learned from our past mistakes? Here is a report on how scientists and public health experts who worked in rural Maharashtra, from where the second wave of COVID started in India, say they had warned the government about the surge and the possibility of a new variant being behind this. The government during this time continued to insist the variants were not behind the surge. India opened up, religious functions happened, public gatherings, electoral rallies took place. Take a look at what followed.
These 3 variants are there, and the other 2 N440K and E8484K variants are there, but there is no reason today for us to believe on the basis of scientific information that these are responsible for the upsurge of the outbreak that you see in some districts of Maharashtra as also in Kerala.
Was this overconfidence, or was the government blissfully unaware? In spite of the B.1.617 variant being sequenced in India as early as October 2020 and cases of this variant surging in Amravati in Maharashtra, the government of India attributed the rise to other factors. It dismissed reports that an Indian variant was leading the spike. The first warning signs emerged as early as February.
I was in the district Amravati and Akola, visited these districts, and I realized that the occurrence of cases in these areas, including Akola and Amravati, were very peculiar. People were not following COVID appropriate behavior.
Okay.
And it was not only in these areas, it was throughout the country.
Experts claim they had warned the government.
I did speak to my colleagues, Professor V.K. Paul, Dr. Singh, and also colleagues from NIV and the professor of microbiology in BJ Medical College, the Health Secretary Maharashtra. So were discussed or informed by me saying that I am apprehensive and there is definitely something is wrong somewhere. I feel this virus needs to be, sequencing needs to be done very quickly.
The variant, now known as Delta, triggered a catastrophic wave of coronavirus cases in India and has since spread to more than 40 other countries. In May, the World Health Organization called this a variant of concern, citing its higher transmissibility. India today has access to a study done by the INSACOG. the consortium of labs undertaking genome sequencing, and also the National Center for Disease Control. The study clearly says the reason behind the second wave was the Delta variant first sequenced in India. It is amply clear we missed the early warning signs.
The biggest warning India missed in the narrative of Indian exceptionalism. Second, we should have been prepared for the pandemic or any subsequent wave as long as the world was in the pandemic. Third, India could have done far better on genomic sequencing, therefore identifying the new variants which were emerging. Fourth, the vaccination could have been accelerated.
While the Delta variant raged, India saw mass gatherings at election rallies, religious festivals and other social events. The result, a deadly spread of infections. What began in Amravati spread across India and on to other nations in the globe. In April early this year, a group of scientists appointed by the government of India to study the trajectory of coronavirus cases made a projection about the peak of a second wave in the first week of May. They were right. Also, they made projections correctly about the decline of the second wave and again a third wave sometimes towards the end of this year. The question is, in spite of all of these projections and warnings, where did we really go wrong? And also, will we learn from the mistakes of the past? In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today. Well, that's all in this episode of COVID 360. Until next time, stay safe, stay well. Thank you for watching.